want to tell you a little story. A few months back, my friend Woody Guthrie and I, we met a young man. He dropped in on us out of nowhere and he played us a song. In that moment, we got a feeling we were getting a glimpse of the future.
Alright guys, welcome back to my channel and time for another episode of Luke's Reviews. On today's video, Timothée Chalamet stars as Bob Dylan in this music biopic of the icon's rise to fame in A Complete Unknown. A young Bobby Dylan arrives in New York in the early 60s with nothing but a guitar and a couple of cases to his name. After a chance encounter with Pete Seeger, Bob Dylan soon finds that his career in the folk music industry skyrockets. But as well as having to deal with the cost of fame and romantic entanglements, Dylan is also keen to transition music style completely, something which at the time was completely unheard of. Before I get underway with any more of this review, I think it's probably worth mentioning that my knowledge and thus affection towards Bob Dylan before seeing this film was practically non-existent. I think I'd heard maybe one or two of his songs, and I knew that he was quite an elusive figure. So much so to the point where, myself included, but for many others as well, thought he was actually dead. Sorry, Bob. But as all good biopics should do, I was hoping that A Complete Unknown wouldn't play simply to the Bob Dylan fans and know-it-alls. As entertaining as I hoped the film would be, I was also hoping to learn more about who Bob Dylan was, his beginnings, his road to this music icon that many know him to be. Sadly though, A Complete Unknown does not provide that peek behind the curtain that I was keeping my fingers crossed for. James Mangold and his team have clearly put in a lot of effort, but this film is nothing more than a 2.5-hour concert reel of his highlights. Admittedly, a very well-made 2.5-hour concert reel, but for anyone out there who is wanting to learn more about who Bob Dylan was as a human being, I'm sorry to say, but this movie does not provide that. And therefore, in my opinion, A Complete Unknown is not sufficient enough of a biopic. Let's share what is good about the film, though. First and foremost, the name on everyone's tongue leaving this film should well and truly be Timothée Chalamet. Once again proving that he is one of the brightest stars in Hollywood today, and surely has a decorated career well ahead of him. Now, it might be a cliche to say, but Chalamet really does disappear into this role. His committal to perfecting Dylan's cadence, accent, mannerisms, and above all else, his unmistakable singing voice just shows Chalamet's true dedication to this role. He is absolutely extraordinary. Now, you may feel very little towards Dylan in this role, but I don't want it mistaken. I don't think that is the fault of Chalamet in the slightest. Disappointingly, I think that blame should be focused squarely on the screenwriters, because, as I've mentioned, there's never a point where they stop and actually explore the character and the persona of Bob Dylan. Instead, they like to address that he likes to keep things secretive, and then move swiftly on to his next folk performance. But on the topic of those music performances, they do impress. James Mangold has a very, very keen ear for sound design. He more than proved that for Ford and Ferrari, and he does it again in A Complete Unknown. These performances are loud, at points deafening. The intention is to immerse the audience, so it makes you feel like you're in attendance at either these festivals or you're privy to watching Dylan in his recording studio. Edward Norton is very good in the film, complete with a massive forehead, but as Pete Seeger, he adds a real sense of warmth to the film, often attempting to anchor Bob whenever he threatens to become a real dick to those around him. I will say, though, he does seem to give off this vibe of Mr. Rogers, but Norton doesn't allow the character to ever feel kind of schmaltzy. Monica Barbaro carries a good tune as Joan Baez, but it's Elle Fanning who comes off somewhat shortchanged as the doting love interest to Bob, who is inevitably cast to the wayside. And shout out to Boyd Holbrook, who makes a few brief appearances as Johnny Cash and carries with him an unmistakable aura whenever on screen. Sadly though, I can't help but circle back to my overall lack of investment in this story, and unfortunately, and as a result, Bob Dylan himself. The movie tells us what an influential songwriter he is. The movie tells us how game-changing a cultural shift it was when he moved from folk to electric. The movie tells us how much of an arsehole he was. But can you spot a common trend here? The movie does a lot of telling us things, but very, very rarely do you actually feel those things. They are two very, very different approaches, and it's a shame that a complete unknown simply just goes for checking the fact boxes. It also doesn't help that the film is painfully conventional. James Mangold has done a music biopic before. He did Walk the Line, which was to great success, as has proven this one to be. It's got a lot of awards attention, and bravo to it. Unfortunately, though, it doesn't do anything to make itself stand out to me. I am not saying that Bob Dylan should have been played by an armadillo, like we saw in Better Man, the Robbie Williams biopic. It doesn't need that level of style. But I do think that the film could have benefited from playing around with the form a little more, toy with it. Because otherwise, it's just annoyingly simplistic. If you're familiar with Bob Dylan and his works, or just fancy escaping for 2.5 hours to listen to Timothée Chalamet sing what feels like his entire catalogue, then perhaps A Complete Unknown might be for you. However, if you're after a richer character study about an influential music icon that has an air of mystery around him, then I'm sorry to say that this film will not fulfill those expectations. Chalamet is the only reason I'd recommend this. Otherwise, much like my opinion on some of the songs from Bob Dylan, I'd give it a listen once, but I'm unlikely to seek it out again. So overall, I'm going to give A Complete Unknown a 5.5 out of 10. Anyway, guys, those were my thoughts on A Complete Unknown. Let me know. Have you had a chance to see the film yet? What did you think? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And my question to you, with Timothée Chalamet being a brilliant casting decision to play the role of Bob Dylan, who do you think is the best piece of casting in a music biopic? But that's all the time we have for today, so thank you very much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.
Hello, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have, make sure to click that like button, and if you aren't already, click that subscribe button too.